So I'm actually recording this before I go to see the new Scream movie. I'm pretty excited for this one, as the very first time I watched Scream over quarantine, I thought it was a very smart film that worked really well as a thriller with a solid mystery element and a good amount of comedy sprinkled throughout. It was actually a huge inspiration for a short film I made during my senior year in college with Villanova Television. The link is in the bio. Please watch it if you want. I enjoyed the second Scream as well, but I've never seen Screams 3 or 4. To my understanding, they are not the most beloved entries in the franchise. So I'm going into this movie somewhere between franchise follower and casual audience member. Hopefully I'm knowledgeable where it counts and can provide a good perspective for both camps. Scream, when it came out, was a sort of lampshade on horror movies of the time. Its initial title was actually Scary Movie, and it was a heavy inspiration for what the real Scary Movie eventually became. It was successfully able to mock the horror genre that it was taking part in. And it was also able to show that it loved horror movies with the amount of care that went into its script and the creation of the film overall. It was very much a movie for people who love movies, and it really helped popularize the sort of meta-commentary that is so common in a lot of blockbusters today, for better or worse. I am hoping that the same amount of care can be brought into this new entry into the series, and that I will come back from this excited to be able to recommend the movie to fans of the franchise or new watchers alike. Off to see Scream in the theaters, this time sporting a delicious oatmeal raisin cookie for my roommate. Let's hope I like the movie. See you guys in about 2.5 hours.
Hello, Sydney. It's an honor.
Alright, I am back from seeing Scream, recording my initial reactions because I've decided that the street is simply just too loud. Overall, it was a very, very enjoyable movie. I really liked it. I think it has a lot to offer. A lot to talk about with this movie in terms of theme and just everything it sets out to do that I think it does well. So this could be a longer review, so buckle up, I guess. Okay, before I get going, just a huge shout out to my roommate Jack for the oatmeal raisin cookie. It was delicious. Thank you so much. So, getting going, after seeing the new Scream, I am pleased to say that it met all of my expectations and proved to be a very enjoyable watch. Everything that it sets out to do, and everything it should do, it does well. With the self-aware and meta-knowledge that the series provides, along with how the new Scream uses this to drive the story, it is welcoming to both newcomers and returning fans of the series. The more meta nature of the Scream movie is also used to deliver what I thought to be an interesting message about entertainment and film industry as a whole. It's nothing groundbreaking, but for anyone familiar with the current culture of movies, horror films, or even just someone who's a fan of a running franchise or older movies, it's a fun idea. Despite being a horror movie, Scream is never truly scary, but it doesn't really try to be. As the movie itself says, it works best as a whodunit, where you're actually worried about how dangerous the killer is. Comedy and drama is sprinkled throughout, along with some very tense scenes, and that's really all that I was looking for. In terms of performances, the old and new cast alike do their jobs exactly as they need to. I'm not going to say anyone did phenomenal or knocked it out of the park, but it felt very solid for the acting in a slasher movie. Courtney Cox is back as Gail Weathers, Neve Campbell reprises her role as Sidney Prescott, and David Arquette comes back as Dewey, the lovable deputy. Each of them provides a unique take on people who have lived through trauma multiple times and attempted to move on in different ways. The ways that they're drawn back into the story are believable and work within the narrative, and each of them is handled well, where they get their moments to shine. Though it is admittedly weird to see Courtney Cox in this, and she never says something along the lines of, "Could there be any more murder victims?" I've watched too many Friends reruns. In terms of the storyline, I think Scream manages to bring the slasher subgenre of horror into the modern era very well. Halloween took a much more serious and sinister approach to its soft reboot of its franchise, and Scream goes along the path of doubling down on the style that made it such a hit in the 1990s. It knows it's a sequel, it pokes fun at how it's also a soft reboot of the franchise, and it knows the world has changed since when its first movie came out. Not only does it adapt to these changes, but it plays with them in ways that make for creative tension when the killer is around. If you've seen the trailer with the home security sequence, it manages to do things like that several times with great success, and it never feels too repetitive. The story itself primarily focuses on a completely new group. High schoolers whose friend was attacked by a new ghost face, along with the estranged sister of this victim, at the center of it all, are working, along with her own boyfriend, to try to put a stop to everything. As is the theme in these movies, everyone is connected somehow to the events of the past. Not in a way that you need to have seen all the movies to know what's going on, but this is particularly why the people are targeted throughout the film. As they struggle to identify and catch up to this killer who is bringing back the past to haunt them, they turn to the experienced survivors of the previous Scream entries to help them. Things continue to spiral, even with the backup of the returning cast, and it all comes down to one final bloodbath where everyone is hysterically trying to figure out who is gutting their friends like a market-price fish. Overall, the movie is a lampooning of itself and of the current entertainment industry, but it is done with love and you could always tell that. The plotline itself is incredibly similar to the original Scream that came out in '96, and this could feel stale or lazy, but the twists and updates brought to it, along with the commentary for a new and more modern audience, feel rewarding instead. For instance, the opening of the film, featured prominently in the trailer, is very much a repeat of the original opening of the first Scream. The movie knows this, and it wants you to know too. It has fun with repetition in ways that make it feel fresh and modern, while being rewarding for anyone who recognizes the pattern. Recently, many movie franchises have tried to start again fresh with a more modern style. Namely, such entries like The Force Awakens and Matrix Resurrections come to my mind. While the Star Wars version of this reboot sequel thing is an obvious repeat of the original movie, down to the Death Star being destroyed and everything, it felt to me pretty lazy when it came out, like it just wanted to make some money. The Matrix Resurrections tried to be more self-aware and provide a commentary on the pop culture landscape, and it being obsessed with existing properties and forcing everything to keep going with sequels, and it managed to almost be interesting. But The Matrix never really felt like it was able to stand on its own as a good action movie, while also putting a lampshade on other action movies. Scream seems to be the best of both worlds here. It's a rehashing, or re-slashing, sequel. One where you can tell that thought and care were put into it, even if they're just repeating some moments from the original with a modern spin. You don't care if it's familiar because it's done with detail, care, and made fresh with more than just some better camera work or flashier set design. The references and callbacks to the original aren't forced in ways that make the audience think, hey, remember that? But things that occur naturally within the universe that the story creates, and it feels rewarding that these old moments seriously matter for the new story. It's able to mock current horror movies, laugh at itself, and then do everything it makes fun of in a way you can appreciate and take seriously. It swaps between thriller, comedy, and whodunit incredibly well, and you can tell everyone is having a great time as they do it. I really enjoyed it, and I think most everyone else would. Obviously, there's more reward if you've seen a Scream movie before, but even those going in blind will still have a lot to love. However, if you can, watch at least the original Scream before you see this one. It stands up pretty well if you go into it thinking it's a murder mystery instead of a genuinely scary movie, and Reese Witherspoon is even in it. Now for the next bit. I'm going to talk about the themes and commentary of the movie, which will provide very minor spoilers, but nothing too serious. If you already want to see it, I'd say back out now. Otherwise, let's get into this. Scream has always been a series that calls attention to the evolving effects that media has on individuals and the public environment, and it doesn't shy away from this in the new movie, with our new characters being elevated horror aficionados, enjoying movies like The Babadook, Get Out, or The Witch. Scream is a media format where media exists in the world, and it feels refreshing. People are all aware of the tropes of slasher movies and such, which makes you resent them less when they are inevitably tricked into making the stupid choice, like investigating that strange noise by themselves. The Scream movies themselves exist in the world of Scream, though they are renamed to be called the Stab films in this movie. They're a hugely popular series that essentially dramatizes the events of the actual movies and have been the inspiration for many of the Scream sequels. This works in a way where it can highlight the more morbid culture that we have developed because of media. Things such as serial killer obsessions or true crime podcasts are all lampooned a bit here. But it makes the main characters of the movie feel believable when they're immediately joking about their friend getting stabbed and calling one another the murderer the next day at school. This idea was present in the original, and our culture has definitely made this behavior in the entry feel realistic as well, even if it is exaggerated a bit more. The new Scream even takes it a step further and addresses toxic fandom and the more lazy sequeling ideas of Hollywood in general. For anyone who has spent any amount of time on the internet trying to enjoy something, the commentary on fandom is just beautifully refreshing. For anyone who has wondered where any original action movies have been in the past decade, the commentary is a bit cathartic as well. Scream presents itself as a requel, an entry where something is between a sequel and a reboot. I mentioned this a bit with The Force Awakens and Matrix Resurrections. The legacy characters like Sidney Prescott return, but the focus is on the new characters who are tied to this legacy somehow. It then goes on to mock people on the internet who are literally obsessed with media franchises and have actual meltdowns about almost anything being different in these kinds of movies. It claims you can't do anything too different or else you'll ruin everyone's childhood, and you can't completely remake things because then you'll just get called lazy. This commentary is primarily targeted at right-wing enjoyers of media. I put that in air quotes because it feels like these people don't enjoy anything, of franchises. The people who cry and shout about forced diversity every time there's a minority on screen or a straight white man isn't the entire focus of every single piece of thing to be put out in the world. You know, people on the internet. People who just have unhealthy relationships to things that they do not want to admit are just supposed to be entertainment or a product to sell toys to kids. Star Wars. The way toxic fandoms and fandom in general play into the story of this movie work really well. People want their perfect sequel to a franchise that they think belongs to them personally, and they are quite literally willing to kill to get it. They are entirely unhealthy people who need therapy and to get a foot back in the door of reality. Of course, this message will go fully over the heads of most everyone who actually falls into this camp, but it is delightful to hear as someone who has observed this cringy behavior on the internet ever since they became way too interested in movies. I'd even argue this theme makes the movie cathartic enough to warrant a viewing all on its own. In a moment, I'm also going to talk about the more specific details of the plot, so actual hard spoilers are coming. Back out now if you care, otherwise you've been warned and are essentially about to go wander into the dark basement alone with the killer on the loose. The plot and sequences of Scream are good fun. Many of the movie's memorable sequences, as I said, are well-executed modernizations of Scream classics, but it all feels fresh. Ghostface uses technology to his advantage throughout the movie, either tricking people with it or downright trapping them with their home security systems. Opening up by an overriding home security system and brutally attacking Tara, one of the main characters, the movie does not hold back and gets moving quickly. The girl survives, and this lures everyone who cares about her to become easy targets. Her estranged sister, Sam, and her boyfriend return from another town to check on Tara. As the group quickly becomes overwhelmed, Sam and the boyfriend go to a survivor and former officer, Dewey, for help. The hunt is on as he reluctantly accepts, and more bodies begin to pile up. This is where the most meta character of all, Mindy, explains the idea of the requel, and everyone throws themselves into understanding this absurd scenario. She specifically gets some good jabs at toxic fandom, hating Stab 8, which was made by the Knives Out guy, basically The Last Jedi. She ended up being one of my favorites of the new group, along with Tara and Sam's boyfriend, Kirsch. Kirsch and everyone else begin frantically researching the Stab movie lore by trying to solve the mystery, and it's fun to root for them as they're trying to almost do the exact same thing that you're doing in the audience. Watching YouTube videos, rewatching the old movies, trying to figure out what exactly this killer could be up to. Looking for any rules, patterns, or recurring themes, and when this sort of commentary is done with love and earnestness, it just works. Eventually, Gale and Sydney, the legacy characters, are drawn in to help as the killer keeps coming back for this new group, and they try to put all of this behind them and the suffering victims. But even they can't seem to pin it all down. The killer gets a few more moments to shine, pulling off a tense home invasion and recreating a scene from Psycho to pull the rug out from under everyone at the last second. Ghostface gets some seriously brutal kills in this movie, and they do not hold back at all. You really feel awful for these victims as it starts to go on. The killer finally invades the hospital, trying to finish the job on Tara. Everyone is frantic as they try to reach her on time, and Tara does her best to hide and survive. The extra tension here of having such an injured and immobile character in Tara try to survive the scenario is done super well, and everything is drawn out just well enough, but it isn't overdone. Tara is saved at the very last second, but not without a cost, and just about everyone seems ready to give up and flee. But as they say, welcome to Act 3. The killer lures everyone to the location where the climax of the first film took place as they try to make their escapes. This killer wants to finish the job in the place where it all started. One standout moment of tension here is when the Find My Friends app is twisted against one of the characters, and they're forced to watch themselves get hunted down on their own phone screen. Paranoia becomes the true enemy here, with everyone suspecting everyone else, and there being a lovely recreation of the look behind you from the first Scream movie. Then we reveal our killers to be... Dramatic pause for spoilers. The boyfriend, Kirsch, and Tara's best friend, Amber, who I realize I've completely failed to mention in the story so far, but she really flew under the radar. Good job at being a murderer. Both are psychotic fans who want to reinvigorate their favorite franchise with a classic plot and some serious stakes. They become completely unhinged, and it's just a joy to watch it unfold. Sydney, Gale, Tara, and Sam fight back as best as they can, and it almost becomes a sort of action movie at the very end. Every remaining survivor has become completely fed up, shooting through the doors before even checking to see who's behind them, trying to light each other on fire, and doing whatever they can to get out of the house alive. As they turn the tide on Amber and Kirsch, Amber's actor gets typecasted to death, and Kirsch is a cathartic victim of a psychotic breakdown by his ex-girlfriend, Sam. Some more great callbacks, homages, and twists in the original Scream's climax make for a very entertaining finale. The dust settles and the survivors don't have much to say. Things seem to wrap up in a neat little bow for everyone, and this could certainly be a worthy ending to the franchise. I would definitely recommend giving this movie a try to anyone, and especially if you've seen the prior films. It is a great potential conclusion to the franchise. But, you know,
People love the sequels.
4 to 5 stars. Check it out.